So I have some very the way that religion helps me is that I cross-reference everything that's said to me in terms of basic principles. Is this possible or is it impossible? Does it mean that we ate from the tree of knowledge or we didn't eat from the tree of knowledge and we're immortal? Well, if the conclusion is we have to be immortal, then everything you're saying is bullshit. And then I just throw you out. The dollar can never die. They can always be there. There could be like a whole garbage dump of dollars like piled up to the sky, and they'll be there. That's the dollar. It's just nobody wants it.
Rafi Farber delves into the intersection of religion and economics, offering a unique perspective on ancient texts and modern finance. Join us as Farber uncovers hidden economic insights within religious narratives, challenging conventional interpretations. Subscribe for more expert analysis.
It's hard to be intellectually honest with these things. Even if you try to, you end up fooling yourself. So I just try to keep that principle in the back of my head that I don't know how much I'm brainwashed or how much I think I'm telling the truth. So as long as you can sort of be meta aware of that and always double check yourself and triple check yourself, there's some things that you just can't escape from unless you're like a Buddhist monk that spends all his time meditating and separating his consciousness from his thoughts. Which I've had a few stints of that when I broke up with a girlfriend once, and then I had to sort of separate from my mind and try to practice separating from one's thoughts, which is kind of eerie, but it only took me so far. I can't separate myself from what really keeps me grounded from the knowledge of that I'm not going to be here forever and that eventually I'm going to be dead, and then I really have no idea what happens. So it all comes from that rounded level, and not many people can have that. So I was educated in a religious Jewish institution as a kid, and I come from a background of purely logical school of thought that rejected any kind of mysticism, and basically took Judaism from a logical perspective and proved it philosophically through mass revelation sort of arguments made by medieval rabbis. And I threw out all the spirituality and I just so okay, this makes sense, and this gives me about 3,000 years of rooted history that I can look back on. So okay, I'm grounded now and I'm just going to stay here. This is my rock and I'm not moving from it. And economics came in later. So when I understood intuitively that Ron Paul was right, who was, the guy that pretty much said that every question I had about this system that didn't make any sense to me, he basically said I was right about these questions and this is how I'm supposed to look at it. It was the same structure that really cemented Judaism in my head. It was okay, we take the basic principles of logic and we build it up and we make this stable mountain that you can now go back and you can access any part of it, and that it gives you stability, intellectual stability, emotional stability. Whenever something is shaken up in my life, I just go back to that base. And now, since I knew that Ron Paul was right intuitively, I took what I knew from him and I looked for it in the Bible and in the Talmud. And look, people tell me, well, oh, you're cherry picking sources and you're saying this source and not that source. And what I say, yeah, I am. Well, there's a lot of discussion in the sources behind me, and a lot of them agree, a lot of them disagree. There's a lot of different things going on. And, I'm going to pick the ones that I think are right, and I'm not necessarily going to throw out the ones that I think are wrong, but I'll put them to the side and try to organize them later. So, if I can tie in, it all comes down to like basically stop stealing, right? If you understand that inflation is theft and you're not allowed to do that, well, then why are there booms and busts? Well, you can create all these academic books and all academic theories, which some of them might be true, about why there's a boom and a bust, and you can explain how interest rates influence it, and the builder analogy of Mises, and get all this into your head, and you say, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. Well, what do you understand now? You understand how theft on a societal scale destroys everybody. Basically, that's the answer. So stop stealing. It all comes down to the 10 Commandments, basically. And that's what we have to realize. Why are there booms and busts? Because people are stealing from each other. So, and then it all fits into the sources that I have. Nothing's going to sway that from me, no matter what academic argument you make or you don't make, because I know that this is all stealing. if you're asking me, like, I look at these things and then I look at stuff in the Bible. It's not really just the Bible. It's a lot of it is the Talmud. I'm not, Judaism is not a strictly biblical based religion in terms of we look at the words in the Bible. We always have a glass through which we see them. It's called Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law. It's a built up interpretation of all the 127, 128 generations since we got the Torah. We can't just ignore a part of it and then come up with a new thing that isn't based on anything in the past. That just it makes it unanchored, and then you just start building anything anywhere, and then you just break up as a people. So you have to stay together. But I can see things. I can I can notice basic things that I didn't see when I wasn't reading these stories in terms of an economic perspective. One is that, for example, immediately before the story of the Garden of Eden is told, we have these random verses that the Eden is in this place and it's surrounded by these rivers and there's gold here and the gold is good. Like, okay, well, why is that there? And then like you kind of just like read over it and you're like, well, okay, well, there's gold there. And then, well, it's telling you like he's putting economic things in place so that when there is a society, there will be the materials ready for it. And then it was a few years ago where I was having a discussion with a friend of mine who was actually in the U.S. Army, and he's like also a very intellectual guy like us. And we were going over the story of Eden, and he basically he's like, well, before they ate from the tree, right? Before Adam and Eve ate from the tree, they had infinite time. They were immortal. And then once they ate from the tree, then they became mortal. So you have the introduction of something called time preference, right? If you have infinite amount of time, you have no time preference. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want. You live forever. So there's no economics. But once you have a limited amount of time, you have time preference. Therefore, you have interest rates. Therefore, you're going to die, and you have to start working, right? So I was like, oh, so this is the founding of the economy. This is why there's scarcity in the world, because we're all going to die. That kind of clarified it. So it puts us in a situation where we have to acknowledge the fact that there are a finite amount of things in the world, and that has us deal with our mortality. So whenever somebody comes at me and says, well, you can just print money and then people will be rich, well, that doesn't really jive with the fact that we're all going to die. So that has to be false.
The overview highlights Rafi Farber's unique fusion of economic principles with ancient scriptures, rooted in intellectual honesty and religious tradition. His encounter with Ron Paul's insights led to a parallel revelation, aligning with his logical framework from Judaism. Farber's interpretation extends beyond Judaism, advocating for religion as a societal framework fostering cooperation and moral responsibility. Contemplating prophecy, Farber delves into personal experiences, recognizing the enigmatic interplay between consciousness and destiny.
So I have some the way that religion helps me is that I cross-reference everything that's said to me in terms of basic principles. Is this possible or is it impossible? Does it mean that we ate from the tree of knowledge, or that we didn't eat from the tree of knowledge and we're immortal? Well, if the conclusion is we have to be immortal, then everything you're saying is bullshit, and then I just throw you out. The dollar can never die. They can always be there. There could be like a whole garbage dump of dollars like piled up to the sky, and they'll be there. That's the dollar. It's just nobody wants it. If you were saying maybe humanity needs religion, maybe it's not literally true. Brett Weinstein talks about this. He talks about literal truth versus metaphorical truth, right? That religion, in terms of that, it constrains it constrains our lust for just gathering resources to ourselves by any means possible, and that forces a cooperation. If we have this moral code that I can't steal from you, you can't steal from me, that forces us to work together to try to produce more things, and that eventually builds a division of labor. So I mean, we'll get back to what you were thinking about in a second, but this I disagree with Brett Weinstein a little bit. I mean, I do believe in a difference between metaphorical truth, like a religion as a system that prevents us from infringing on each other, gives us all boundaries, private property.
Thanks for joining us as we delved into Rafi Farber's fascinating take on religion and economics. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content.